I've always had a fascination with rip-offs and bootlegs. Things created solely because something is doing well and some other company wants to make a quick buck. Games, toys, music, even television have all seen their share of other things trying to be that thing or existing just long enough to capitalize on the hype. Sometimes they're copyright violatingly obvious, other times you have to know the media they're trying to copy. And of course, movies are no exception. Theatrical copycats have been around since nearly the creation of film itself, with every decade having a fad or two for studios to churn out their own takes on the zeitgeist, but the floodgates were truly opened with the advent of video cameras and movie rental. Suddenly, anyone could make a movie, find a distributor, and have it sent to blockbusters across the nation for anyone curious, or stupid, enough to rent it and net the producers a profit. As long as they could get a movie out while the real thing was still a thing, they could hop on the bandwagon and grab just enough cash to make it worthwhile. The rush got so fast that at some point, producers discovered that they could make even more money if they made the movie before the movie they were cashing in on was even released, then released it alongside the movie. And thus, the mockbuster was born. The movie not just trying to convince you it's related to the actual movie, but that it is the actual movie. If you were a kid during the 90s or early 2000s, you probably remember seeing, or even owning, cartoons that had the same title and even similar box art to Disney movies. So that meant they were the same thing or just as good, right?
The food is delicious, it's pure gastronomy. But don't ask what you're eating, cause it's Paris, mon ami.
Yeah, it didn't matter how cheap or rushed the production was or how watchable the finished product ended up. If you bought it hoping it was related to or even was the real thing, they had your money and that's all that matters. And in today's world, with cheap DVD and Blu-ray production and multiple streaming distribution services, it's never been easier for a studio or group of fans to produce their own takes on popular movies and have them seen worldwide. There have been a number of studios that have based their business model on this concept, and chances are you've seen, or know someone who's seen, at least one of these straight-to-DVD masterpieces. But in my opinion, none have been as prolific or shameless as the mockbuster masters themselves, the Asylum. Most of these blatantly capitalize on a recent theatrical film, and some have even garnered their own mainstream attention. They've become so well known for their modus operandi, their name is synonymous with the type of movie they create. Even when a movie isn't made by them, you can take one look at its cover and say, oh, that looks like an Asylum knockoff. They've mastered this low-budget, lightning-fast production so strategically, they've made a profit with every movie they've released. A feat even some movies they've copied can't match. So what is it about the Asylum's movies that keep people coming back, even long after we've caught onto their tricks and they've gained a reputation as, well, a joke? Or is that the reason? Well, that's what I intend to find out. Starting this January, I am going to watch every single Asylum-based movie to see if there's any redeeming quality to their productions. I'll start at the beginning, and since the Asylum is still going strong and releasing at least a dozen movies every year, this is one journey I'll likely never see the end of. I'll admit I haven't seen most of the movies they're cashing in on, but that's not going to be a problem because neither have they. Will most of these movies be complete and utter crap? Ho, I have no doubt. But as I binge-watch the Asylum's catalog, I'm holding out hope that a couple may be better than they have any right to be. Or at the very least I'll be laughing so hard I can ignore how stupidly horrible they are. And for anyone who wants to say that I'm directly ripping off Disney-Sember, or Monster Madness, or Cinemadonna, or Long Box of the Damned, or some other sequential-themed review show more notable critics have done, well, consider this my own mockbuster. So, until I lose the last of my sanity and I need to be placed in an actual institution, consider me locked in the Asylum.
I wasn't thinking about having a baby when I was having sex. I was thinking about sex when I was having sex.
When the Asylum was founded in 1997, they were initially a distribution service for low-budget movies. By which I mean they distributed the leftover scraps that chose them over Lionsgate. And what fun, over-the-top, cheesy production did they decide to feature as their first movie? Bellyfruit, a heavy, realistic stage drama about teen pregnancy. Oh boy. Directed and co-written by Carrie Green, yes, Sandy from the Goonies, Bellyfruit tells the stories of 3 different teenage girls who live in the slums of Los Angeles, all of whom become pregnant and are placed under pressure to figure out what to do next. Shanika is a black 14-year-old who was abandoned by her mother 5 years ago and now resides in whatever foster home she's stuck with next, earning the label of being extremely difficult to deal with. Between dealing with her unsympathetic caretaker and her sister being adopted by another family who soon moves far away, she finds love and solace in a sexual relationship with Damon, a much older man. When she inevitably becomes pregnant through their fling, and her foster home won't house pregnant girls, will she convince Damon to take her in and give her the happy life she desires? Christina is a 14-year-old Caucasian girl who lives with her 30-year-old junky, immature mother and is often left alone as her mother tries to make money or tries to find a new husband. She spends her time partying and having sex with whatever boy wants her that night, and eventually she becomes pregnant and has a kid. Can she handle the responsibility of being a single teenage mother as well as deal with her own irresponsible mother and new stepfather? Araceli is a 16-year-old Latino girl who gets pregnant by her boyfriend Oscar and is thrown out of her house. Living with her ex-convict boyfriend and his brother, can she handle the pressures of being a young mother as well as find enough money to survive? And what happens when Oscar falls back on his criminal past? Alright, I'm way out of my league trying to analyze and review this kind of film. I came into this retrospective expecting cheesy sci-fi and a couple pandering family movies, and the first thing I have to tackle is teen pregnancy. I'll try my best to give my thoughts, but I apologize in advance if I'm not showing the amount of respect I should be, or if I just don't get it. The movie's most defining attribute is its overall realistic tone, and how down-to-earth and non-Hollywood its characters and setting are portrayed. It's about 3 teenagers who are all in their situations because of their own bad choices and the actions of people they're stuck with or associate themselves with. There's no forced villain, no comic relief, no cliched friends, no artistic horror elements, no rape plots, nothing that mainstream or exploitation studios try to shove into similar movies to make them more appealing to larger audiences. There are meaner characters, such as Shanika's warden or Christina's stepfather, but they act like how people in those situations would act. There's no one-dimensional slut-shaming bully or similar characters written just to make the girls look good. It's young teenagers put into situations and acting like how each of them would react. And they don't always make themselves look heroic. There's a scene where Christina cons her boyfriends out of money and tries to have an abortion. In a more mainstream movie, this would be presented as a villainous action, or something the character would decide to do, then have an emotional breakdown over and decide not to go through with. Here, she legitimately wants to have an abortion because that's the kind of character she is. And all that stops her is that she's told she can't because she waited too long and the baby's too far developed. She's not necessarily bad, this is just something someone her age with her life in this situation would understandably attempt. And she reacts like how someone like her would right after receiving the news. There's no emphasized breakdown or a scene of her just crying. The look of disbelief on her face as she realizes her mistake and the consequences of her actions is all that's needed to convey just how unprepared she is. This is how the characters in the movie behave. Most of the time they don't display the emotions or actions you would expect from a more dramatized movie. They react how most people would actually react. Think back to a great tragedy in your life. You likely didn't immediately start screaming or crying. You probably heard the news or saw the event, mulled it over in your mind for minutes or even days. Then the reality of the situation hit you and you reacted in your own way. The characters here accept their situations in the same way. Nobody's immediately happy or sad or angry at their situation, and in most cases, they just try to move on. When Araceli is thrown out of her house, she goes straight to her boyfriend and accepts his offer to live with him. Then, when she has the baby, she just lives with it, treats it like it's her life now, and keeps any huge outbursts bottled up. Just the expressions on her face is all that's needed to convey the pain she's trying to keep hidden as she tries to accept her new life. In contrast, Shanika is the most outwardly emotional. She has outbursts, she openly rebels, and she's clearly emotionally unstable, but again, that's the character she is. She's been labeled hard to live with and placed in foster homes that punish her when she tries to find understanding, so you can understand why she acts this way. When told she's pregnant, she's practically dancing for joy, as she's convinced herself this is what was needed for a boyfriend to invite her to live with him. And when things don't go as planned, then the reality of the situation catches up with her and she breaks down. Every action, every subtle expression, every interaction with other people tell more about each character than any line could ever do. Speaking of the acting, it's quite good, though maybe a little out of place. Bellyfruit was originally a play, and that's how everyone in this movie acts, like they're performing on a stage. Their acting is relatively mellowed, with slight changes to their expression and inflections in their dialogue used to convey emotion, rather than close-up shots of exaggerated reactions like other movies like to use. But for theater acting, it's really well done. Maybe there were a couple shots they could have redone to fix a few inflection flubs, but the actors' performances are something to envy. There's a natural flow to their actions and how well they fit their characters, like they were chosen for these roles because they were in similar situations, or would also make these choices. This adds another almost uncomfortable layer of realism to what is already trying to mirror real life. Like you're wondering how much is a performance and how much is the actors just being their normal selves. Of special note is Oscar, played by a then unknown Michael Pena. Just the way he moves and reacts tells you a lot about the character's past, how he wants to forget what he used to be and become a providing father, but how willing he is to go back to that life if he has to. There's a scene where his brother is telling him about a shady operation. Most of the scene, Oscar simply passively dismisses the idea. But when his brother reminds him that he needs money, you can see him mulling over the idea in his head, debating with himself if he should do it, then finally deciding to go through with it. All of this is conveyed within a few seconds solely within his body language. It's that subtlety and attention to detail that foreshadows how versatile an actor Michael would later become. The cinematography is also quite good, and is also shot like a stage production. The camera is usually still, often holding on wide shots with occasional sweeping movements to focus on things off screen, similarly to how an audience would see things occur on stage. If you've seen older movies also based on plays, you've probably noticed this style used before. The movie also fades to black several times, especially near the end, and I usually hate movies that abuse this transition. But in this case, they're used to denote long periods of time passing, so they know how to use it properly. Unlike some recent mainstream movies I could think of, but I digress. The only technical area of the movie I have a problem with is the sound editing. For the most part, it sounds professional and crystal clear, but the transition into the music is sloppy. There's no background music for most of the movie, but when they decide to play some pop track or indie rock song, it's sudden and loud and usually drowns out what the characters are saying. Most of the movie, you can hear the dialogue just fine, but certain scenes you'll need to watch 3 or 4 times to hear what they're saying over the soundtrack. So on a technical level, this movie's very competently put together. How does it hold up on the creative front? Well, now we've reached the problem. Not with the plots themselves, on the contrary, this is some of the most engaging writing and heartfelt care I've seen in a movie in a long time, but it's about teen pregnancy! I don't want to judge this movie because I know nothing about its subject. Did they present the subject competently? I think so, but I don't know. I don't know how to critique the stories without sounding ignorant and up my own ass. I'm actually disappointed that this isn't a bad movie, because then I'd have something to talk about. If this was made by Pureflix or Neil Breen or Kirk Cameron or some other pretentious preachy producer with a tenuous grip on reality, it would have at least given me something horribly wrong I could catch and make fun of. But because it's so well made and is about such a serious topic, I don't know what to say. Nor if I could get away with saying anything. So you'll excuse me if I just skim over this section. The plots are all very well put together, with a clear A to B to C pattern to everything. Something happens that affects the character, that leads to another character's reactions, it leads to this scene. It flows just as naturally as the actors' performances. Sometimes a scene will feel shorter than it's supposed to be, like you feel a conversation or interaction could have gone on longer, and some are only a few seconds long, but they're 3 different stories that have to share a 90-minute movie. I can understand the time crunch. For the most part, and this brings me to the problems I feel like I can safely talk about. While Christina and Araceli's stories I think were told well in the time they were given, Shanika's plot feels more fragmented, like a lot was cut out to make it fit. We see the more traumatic and important parts, such as her interactions with her warden and her sister, her meeting her boyfriend, and her emotional outbursts at being controlled and punished just for existing. But anything about who she actually is, what she likes, her boyfriend, and what effects her boyfriend and others have on her life are all unfortunately missing. This had the opportunity to become the most theatrical and emotional of the 3 segments, but because all we see of her are the dramatic moments, it's hard to sympathize with her as a character. Her plot doesn't even have as much to do with the theme of the movie. She only gets pregnant in the last 10 minutes, while the other 2 girls already had kids in the first third. After that, she has maybe 2 more minutes of screen time, and then her plot just ends. The other 2 plots are wrapped up, we see what the girls ultimately decide to do, but Shanika's just ends, and we never find out what happens to her. Okay, that could be fine, leave one girl's fate open and ambiguous, like I'm sure a lot of these situations ultimately are. But the rest of the movie was already dedicated to showing us the lives of these girls. We're given explanations, we're shown how one thing leads to another, things are brought up and then wrapped up, so to suddenly have an open ending right at the end of the movie just feels out of place. In fact, why is this even 3 different stories? Any of these plots would have worked as their own short films or even standalone movies. Any one of these stories could have been called Bellyfruit and nobody would miss a thing. Okay, there's an underlying theme they have in common. They're all young, pregnant teenage girls living in the slums of Los Angeles. But if you're going to set the plots all in one place, why not have something that links the characters themselves to each other? What if they all knew each other, and the actions of one influenced what another does? Like Shanika learns about how Araceli got pregnant and is living with her boyfriend, and that's the kind of life she wants, so that's why she gets pregnant. At the very least, have a store they all go to, or a club they frequent, or even have them all attend the same school. Something that gives an excuse to have them all on screen at the same time, showing how similar they are to each other. The ending could have been a scene where they're all on the bus, and they're all sitting close to each other. They wouldn't have to know each other, they just look over at one another, share an awareness of what their lives have become, and how they're not alone. Instead, it ends with a statement that nearly 50% of teenage mothers are victims of sexual molestation or rape. Which, since the relationships in this movie were purely consensual, that just seems out of place. It should have just ended with the previous statistic about teenage births, because otherwise, it feels like the movie itself didn't know how to end. Much like I don't know how to end this review. On the whole, this was a very interesting, enlightening film, one that tackles a very serious subject in a serious, yet relatable way. It's not preachy, it clearly knows what it's talking about, and its actors bring a very dreary theme and location to life. I guess I feel that it's one of the best movies I never wanted to see. I'm glad I saw it, but I never would have seen it if I didn't have to for this retrospective. I don't even know who to recommend it to. Who would enjoy a movie like this? I guess if you're studying teen pregnancy or feel like you can relate to the situations these girls have to live through, you'll find something in this movie to be what you're looking for. But if you're looking for fun entertainment or something more in line with the Asylum's later works, insert relevant pun that won't get me massacred here. Oh god, please let the next movie be easier to talk about. Hey there everyone, thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please consider supporting me on Patreon and help me create even more content like this. It's only $1 to get early access to my videos, and only $5 gets you a credit at the end of each of those videos, with higher tiers offering these and even more perks. And as you help me reach certain goals, I have super special content lined up for all of you. Head on over and check out my Patreon today, and I'll see you next time.